Today was Todd Engel's sentencing at the federal courthouse, and I just came out of the federal courthouse. I'm stopping in to grab some lunch, and also it's hotter than Hades outside. I'm going to speak pretty quickly, but I think I speak clearly, so I'm going to go through some of the highlights and the details of what took place in the court, because as we all know, we are going to hear a skewed and very biased version from the Poots. Our favorite reporter, The Hobbit, was there with Mr. Bridge Sniper. He did make a threat towards me as we were leaving the courthouse, so I'll go into that later on. Court started at 9 a.m. Dan Sheese for the prosecution was standing up. I walked in at about 9:15. The courtroom was packed. Not much support outside on the sidewalks as per their normal Carnival Circus Act usually goes. So what they were doing is trying to determine what the sentencing range guidelines were going to be and what the sentencing range was going to be. So when they initially started, we were at 210 to 262 months, and via conversation back and forth with Engel's attorney, Mr. Markowitz, and the prosecution, and also the pre-sentencing advisor, they came down to 135 to 168 months is what Todd would be eligible for. So it was a little bit of boring back and forth, what we call in the legal jargon housekeeping. So one of the things that they were talking about is what Engel was saying and doing on Facebook in 2014 when Bunkerville started. So one of the things that he said was that he was going to war with the federal government. He was oiling his bolt and loading his magazines. Now, these guys don't think that this is inflammatory, but let me tell you, it absolutely is inflammatory. And it gives an indication of what your mindset is when you're perpetrating these acts. It's really hard to backtrack on things like this at a later date when you've recorded it for all posterity. So they cited what Clive Bundy was saying, bring those guns, and made the point that it absolutely was not a protest. He was asking people to lock and load, and that's what they were doing. Engel also said on one of his Facebook posts, "I'm leaving now. I'm going to shut down the freeway via force of arms, and this is going to be an armed standoff." And the visual that Mr. Sheese painted for the courtroom was that by the time Todd Engel got to Bunkerville, he was all tacked out with his AR-15, had extra magazines in his chest plate, and he had his AR-15 at the low ready position. I'm going to talk about that a little bit because there was some back and forth, and it was very evident to me that the court is not familiar with tactical positioning, tactical maneuvering, and what some of this language means. And if this is going to be something that we're going to be dealing with going forward, they really need to start getting some personnel in there that knows what this stuff means, because it absolutely is relevant. Just real quick, being at the low ready position means that your weapon is ready to fire in one movement, basically. So you've got magazines in your weapon, your finger is near the trigger but not on the trigger, and the next position is going to be high ready, and then you're going to engage in shooting. So it's one fluid motion. So to indicate that that was not that threatening of a posture because he was at the low ready was ridiculous. Let's see. He was also pushing the rhetoric that Bunkerville was going to be another Ruby Ridge or Waco scene. They talked about the fact that Engel was convicted for coercion and intimidation. He threatened law enforcement officers, and they went into some of the conversation that took place between him and even the law enforcement officers up in Idaho. He makes the statement and posted on Facebook that he went for guerrilla warfare and was looking for the positions of his enemy. He was ready to wage war with the government. They also brought up the fact that he was at Sugar Pine Mine. So this shows a pattern, okay? So if you actually understand law and understand how the courts and the attorneys and the prosecutors apply the law, you're showing a pattern here that you are absolutely looking for a war with the government. not only have you shown up to one, but now two, so Bunkerville and Sugar Pine Mine, which both were billed via the Facebook posts of the Poots themselves, that these were standoffs against the federal government. He also shows up at Malheur, and we go into that during the exchange in the courtroom. He makes a comment on his Facebook post that this is the night of the long knives, and this was in March when he was actually arrested. I mean, the way these people refer to historical events, and they don't even actually understand history or understand the purpose of history or what we were supposed to learn or how we're supposed to be going forward from here on out, is absolutely astounding. So, you know, let me just make a suggestion here to not get your history education via memes that you see on Facebook. You're really doing a disservice to yourself. The Judge Navarro goes into a little monologue about how the Founding Fathers intended us to resolve our disputes peacefully. Oh, actually, pardon me, that was actually Dan Sheese that went into that, and he's absolutely right. The Founding Fathers had the Revolutionary War, so we would not ever have to go through that process again. And it was actually their hope and prayer that we never had to have another Revolutionary War. And the mechanism that they set in place allows for a peaceful process via the courts and via legislation. Something that these, pretend patriots just can't quite wrap their little heads around. So they used Delimus's and Burleson's sentences as kind of a guideline, because they also had the same pre-sentencing report, and so that was the same metric that was being used to determine what Todd Engel's sentence was going to be. There was an objection by Mr. Markowitz, which is again is Engel's attorney, to the word sniper. The judge did strike that out. I think that she should have left it in, because this is exactly what these people have in their mind when they're taking these tactical positions. When you're taking the high ground and the people that you profess to be protecting are on the low ground, you are taking the high ground for the purpose of taking out enemy fire. And to them, the enemy is the government and law enforcement. So it absolutely is relevant, even though Todd goes into this little soliloquy later on that, oh, I was so far away and I don't know how they could identify me, and I was backing away. No, that's not what a sniper does. I mean, anyone who has watched anything to do with Chris Kyle, who maybe arguably was one of the best snipers, most successful certainly in the history of the United States, is that he would take the high ground. So why does a sniper take the high ground? Just real quick in a nutshell, because of trajectory. When you fire a bullet and it goes through the end of the muzzle, from that point on, the force of gravity is working on that bullet and it is going to fall. This is why in the movies you always see them taking calibrations and accounting for wind and accounting for the trajectory of the bullet, because it's going to drop. So that's why a high position is a superior position. So to me, that indicated what Engel's mens rea, or his mindset was, his intent. Even though he tried to backtrack unsuccessfully, I might add, at a later point in the hearing, and say that he was trying to stop everything from happening and stop it from escalating. Nonetheless, the word sniper was struck. They were utilizing the pre-sentencing report, which is a special office that actually puts this together. They put together all of the time that he served. They put together what sentencing guidelines are. They put together case law. They put together what their recommendation is going to be going forward for what he should be sentenced to. He had even asked at one point in time, when he goes back to Idaho, he calls his local sheriff and he asks him to stay out of the fight if the feds come to get him, because he intends to fight the arrest. I would say his mindset was pretty consistent, that he just wanted to fight. And, let me make a quick aside here. I do feel, it's very a travesty of justice that these men are going through this, because I absolutely believe that the Bundys incited all of these men to show up, by spewing false claims, things that weren't happening, completely leaving out the fact that Cliven had tried to adjudicate these cases and had lost every single time at every single level of the legal system. And I know it's convenient to say, oh yeah, but the system's corrupt and government's corrupt and the law's corrupt and the courts are corrupt. No, it's not, okay? It's not a giant conspiracy theory that every single person that works in any aspect of law or the legal system is corrupt. It's nonsense. I mean, it is a shame that they have been caught up in this, and they continue to believe that they're some kind of heroes when they're not. They're having this false impression of themselves reasserted time and time again by all these sycophantic followers, and they really don't even understand that most of them just want to grift a buck off of their name and fame. And as many people have found out the hard way, fame is fleeting. So the judge then goes into his restitution. She wants, well, the government is asking for $1,544,505.50. Part of that is based on the expense of trying to do the cattle roundup, which obviously they were lawfully doing. They had a court order to do it. Cliven had refused for years and years and years to pay the fee. Let me make another quick commentary here, since this is some of the grumblings that I'm hearing from the people in the gallery, is that, oh, he didn't owe that much, it was never proved. So let me explain this to you. If you have an IRS bill and your bill is $500 and you don't pay it, they're going to tack on fines and fees. You now are going to owe $1,000 or $1,200 or whatever amount that now adds up to. And we've all had to pay fines and fees that we didn't take care of in a timely manner. And if you don't pay the balance that's been tacked on and accrued, guess what? You're still going to have it accruing, and they're still going to come after you. So, you know, it would be nice if people started using some common sense and speaking truth instead of, you know, perpetuating these fallacies that Cliven didn't owe $1 million. Well, he damn sure did by the time he stood up to the government several times and told them no. And one way that the Bundys do this, because they keep saying, well, we don't receive a bill, we don't receive a bill. Well, this came out of Carol's mouth. Anything that looks official that we see at the post office that looks like it comes from the government, we just refuse it and we don't take it up. Okay, well, I guess that would account for them not ever seeing a bill, is because they're refusing the mail. Okay, so next we go into Mr. Markowitz objected to the basis of the restitution. He didn't get very far with that. He actually, in my opinion, was kind of weak in his defense of Todd. For as much as, you know, everybody's building him up and thinking that he's going to get Todd walking out of court today, that clearly did not happen. And like I said, I think he's just looking for his 15 minutes of fame in the spotlight, because he certainly did not advocate for his client very diligently, in my opinion, based on having attended several others of these court cases. Okay, then this is where Markowitz chooses the tactic of going into some interesting monologue, talking about the Civil War and Lee and Grant, and I don't even know what point he was trying to make. I mean, I have a history degree, so I know what he was saying, but I can tell you right now, it was completely lost on the rest of the courtroom, and the judge probably wanted to roll her eyes into the back of her head. He was trying to make the point that during the Civil War, mercy was shown so that we could, you know, because that's a tenet of being American. No, it was, mercy was shown because the country had been ripped apart and Americans were dying, not foreign actors. Americans were dying on both sides. Sometimes brother pitted against brother, sometimes father pitted against son, and President Lincoln wanted to heal the country. He still did what was necessary to enforce the law, and if some clemency was shown to some of these people, it was in the effort to heal the nation. It wasn't because he felt some pity or sorrow towards an individual who was fighting for whatever side that, you know, they had the conscience to fight for. So that argument didn't go very far, and I thought it was rather weak and ill-placed in my opinion. Again, they went back and forth a little bit about the pre-sentencing guidelines and how they were going to determine this. Markowitz was able to get it argued down to the 135 to 168 months as the new range. Todd then chooses to stand up and make his statement, and he starts off with, "I didn't know the Bundys and I didn't have a role in planning." He obviously doesn't understand how a conspiracy theory works. Again, it kind of helps if you have some kind of legal training when you're watching these, and then you're going to profess yourself to be some expert and go out and do poot reporting on the street. You don't need to have the plan. You don't have to have the blueprint, okay? I'm going to do another video at a later point in time and explain how conspiracy theory works. There's two different ways to look at a conspiracy theory, and these guys absolutely did get caught up in this, and the fault lies on their shoulders because they didn't question further. I mean, why would you watch Facebook, which is supposed to be social entertainment, and listen to some crazy old man in Bunkerville say, "Bring your arms, bring your weapons, the government's got my cows"? I mean, it's astounding. So the exchange that's going back and forth is that Todd admits that he made some mistakes. He says, "I let myself get away from me. I got caught up in the emotion and the hype of it all." He at first had claimed that one of his friends had made some of the posts on Facebook. Then he says, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take ownership of it because I'm not here to make excuses. I don't have proof, but my personal opinion is that he made his own posts on Facebook. Most of us are not so dumb that we give our Facebook over to someone else, because we all know people that have, just even left your Facebook open and your kids jump on your Facebook and make a post. It's kind of a stupid defense or excuse, in my opinion. He says that his Facebook posts were ridiculous and he never should have wrote them. He's sorry if it affected the officers. He didn't mean any harm. He admits that he embellished about everything that happened. At one point in time, apparently he made the statement that there's 150 gunmen behind him. He walks that back and says, "Oh, there wasn't 150 gunmen. We were lucky if there were 40 in the wash." And this is the same tactic that they did at Malheur, overinflating their numbers. It really is a very small number of people that will show up and support these people, and go to the extent of bringing their weapons with the intent to fire on, lawful authorities. He then talks about Malheur. Malheur got brought up a couple of times. He says that he went to Malheur to talk Ammon Bundy out of the refuge. He said he had told Ammon that it was tactically a poor plan, and now we have to come to your aid because you can't handle it. I do believe him when he says that, because Ammon had been trying to recruit some of the Pacific Patriot Network and some of these other people, these people that are calling themselves Idaho 3% and all of this nonsense. He wanted them to come in and run the show. Typical Bundy behavior, remove yourself from the direct conflict and just direct others to take the physical action. This theme is repeated not only at Bunkerville, but again at Malheur. Todd then says that his Facebook posts were grandiose. And throughout this whole thing, it occurs to me that he never realizes that this is incitement, okay? So if you go into a situation and there's already some tension taking place, and then you sit there and you start ribbing the guy next to you, saying, hey, jump in there. Hey, look at that jerk, he just did this, this, and this. You're inciting, okay? And incitement is also against the law. We see Kelly Stewart do this a lot. She likes to incite people to call, harass, harangue, flood phone lines. These people really don't understand. They can get prosecuted for incitement. Let's see. He then begins to beg the judge that he's already spent 2.5 years in prison. He's begging her not to give him 18 years. They talk about him being in his 70s by the time he gets out, if he gets the maximum. He talks about if he vows not to be a part of any of this, if she'll release him. But, you know, here's been my observation, and everyone else can say the same, because it's, again, documented via Facebook and their live streams and their Facebook posts, that the minute that they get back out and their time has been served, they're right back on Facebook, you know, posturing up again. I mean, these people are really delusional as to how this process works, and the fact that this can come back and bite them in the butt again. Unbelievable. He's asking for mercy from the court because of his sister and his mom. He goes into the optics of what he thinks the law enforcement saw out there that day, and tries to make the argument, well, but I was standing right next to a cop and you didn't arrest me. No, idiot stick, they're not going to arrest you because they don't want to escalate the situation. So you weren't trying to de-escalate it. The officers were relying on their training and the commands that they were receiving, because they don't get to act individually, unilaterally, like all of you pretend militia do. None of you would take direction from anyone because you all think that you know what's right and what's best. And I've watched it twice now, both at Bunkerville and Malheur. You guys argue left and right. That doesn't happen in the chain of command when you're law enforcement. You're trained and you have to take orders from your superior. Let's see. Oh, then he tries to make the excuse that he had a double spinal fusion, and he claims that he couldn't be in the low ready position. What instantly came to my mind is, oh, okay, you can't stand in the low ready position, but you can drive from Idaho to Bunkerville, which is, I don't know, 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours. Don't ever represent yourself in court unless you have some serious legal training. After he gives his statement, and I want to make a little aside here that Ryan Bundy got up and walked out, Carol Bundy got up and walked out, Shonda Cox got up and walked out. Todd wasn't even finished yet. They didn't know what his sentence was going to be. So let me point that out to you. These people do not care about you. You are a tool. They used you. They step on your back to maintain the spotlight. They don't care. They left. Then Judge Navarro goes into a little bit of a statement of her own, saying that she feels like he is still in denial, which he absolutely was. She thinks that he's pulling an act. I believe he was, based off of his behavior once the marshals escorted him from the room. She believes that he's so deep into the rhetoric that he can't believe the truth. That's true. They've all been brainwashed. Every last one of these supporters is brainwashed by the Bundy cult. Let's see. Oh, you know, he's talking. They keep making fun of law enforcement officers that testify that they're scared, or that they now behave differently today in how they do their job, or even how they interact in their lives because of what they went through at Bunkerville. Well, let me draw you a corollary example. We just recently had the October 1 shooting at the Mandalay Bay, and Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has just released a video, I'd say within the last 2 weeks, of a veteran police officer on the force that froze for approximately 15 minutes in the hallway of the Mandalay Bay as you hear rapid gunfire taking place, several bursts, and he stood there for about 15 minutes. He froze in fear. Despite all the training, he froze in fear. If this happens with law enforcement who train on a regular basis, what the hell do you think is going to happen with these self-prescribed militia dudes that don't train together? They just show up at these events where they think that they're protecting the Constitution. And, you know, I mean, I've seen it firsthand. This whole militia thing is really a bad way to go, folks. You need to understand how the ballot box works, you need to understand how legislation works, and you need to understand how you repeal a law. Because this is not going to work. This is not going to keep going forward like this. This is not how we solve disputes in this country, and we cannot continue to address problems this way. Let's see. So, then she starts going into the sentencing. As I have already stated, he got 14 years. His restitution is going to be determined at a later date, approximately 45 days. He got a $200 fine for each penalty, which has to be paid immediately, so expect the grift for that to be out. He had 3 conditions he has to adhere to when he finally does get released. They talked about he's going to have to take outpatient substance abuse counseling. He is not to communicate with any of his co-conspirators or co-defendants, and that's via phone, via Facebook, via snail mail. He is not to communicate with these people. And I'm going to say right now to Todd's family, you better like get in his ear and start deprogramming him from this brainwashing. You are not patriots. You are not heroes. This is lawlessness and it is vigilantism. And to continue to associate with people, because I'm already seeing people like Eric Parker out here, you know, blustering again, puffing up his chest. He's nothing but a pudgy boy. The deprogramming needs to start already. Okay, so at the end of the sentencing, of course we hear the disrespect of the courtroom and the venue via the Poots sitting in the audience. You know, they're making comments about me as we start walking out in the hallway, you know, making comments about my status as an LDS member. Todd Engel shouts as the marshals are taking him away, this isn't over, freedom isn't free, and he's trying to, you know, have his one last little 15-minute section of fame with his Poot crew as he's hauled away in shackles. I don't think that this serves him well at all. I think that he needs to get his head on straight, get the deprogramming started, and sit down with a reputable attorney and start figuring out what his appeal is going to be, because there's going to be an appeal. Whether or not it's successful or not, if he keeps on in the mindset that he's in, no, it's not. And I do feel bad for his sister and his mom. You know, they weren't the ones that were standing out there with guns at the low ready and making inflammatory Facebook posts and inciting people to violence and riots. You know, so it is sad for them, and that's something that the Bundys just don't give a crap about. It's not that they just got several people landed in prison with their, you know, Bundy freedom. This also has a snowball effect on the families and the children of these men. And now these women, they have to pick up the pieces. And you think that they're going to get all of this grift and all this financial support? It might be there for a little bit, but you think it's going to be there 14 years down the road? Hell no, it's not even going to be there 14 months down the road. So heading out, just a couple of quick notes of interest. A lot of people heading for the elevators all at once. You know, you got your Poot reporters out there. Hobbit had to be front and center. Eric Parker turns and looks at me as I'm going to get on the elevator and shakes his head. You're not getting on. He hasn't learned anything. And let me tell you something, pudgy boy. I am not afraid of you or any of you other pukes, okay? The only reason I don't say something to you in the courthouse is because I actually have respect for the venue, and I have respect for the rule of law, and I have respect for the arbitration process. So the marshal, in order to de-escalate a situation, since they're all, you know, rallied up anyway, asked me to come over to his table, and he got me an escort down. It actually kind of worked out in my favor, because I stopped in at the marshal's office on the second floor. I was still missing some of Cavalier's belongings, and guess who's in the marshal's office? Oh, that would be Cryan Bundy and his trusty sidekick, Old Faithful, Angie Bundy. So I guess he's already enacting, you know, his duties as the pretend wannabe governor of Nevada. That's a federal courthouse, Ryan. So I'm guessing you're just going in and planning how you're going to abolish the federal courthouse in Nevada, because now Nevada's going to be a nation unto itself, and it's going to be, you know, a sovereign nation. Let me explain something to you. They are sovereign states, not sovereign nations. So that's my reporting on what took place in the court. I think that Judge Navarro was very fair. I don't think that Todd showed any contrition whatsoever for his actions. I think it's unfortunate, because I think that his mindset has been put in the place it is because of these idiots out on Facebook. There's a lot more to this. There's going to be more coming down the road, so stay tuned.